Okay, everyone, we are live streaming on YouTube. For those of you joining us on YouTube, welcome.
Hello, Linda.
Hi, Giovanna.
How are you?
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
It's good to see everyone. See lots of familiar faces. Welcome back, Willis. Let's see, Pat, have you joined us before for Discovering Buddhism?
I have not. This is my first time.
So excellent. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. John. Okay. So, looks like it's 7:01. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick welcome. Just want to welcome you back for those of you who have been with us since the Discovering Buddhism Module 1 and 2, and now we're on 3. So this is Discovering Buddhism Module 3, Presenting the Path. This is session 1, and Hemant Pandya will be our instructor for this module. There are 7 sessions, so we go from now until like the 24th of May. Yeah, May 24th. As far as our course materials go, those can be found online. And so if you registered or if you enrolled in this class, hopefully you received an email with information on how to access that information. Rather than going through it here, since most of you are returning, I will just put a few quick little short directions in the chat once we get going. So whether you are joining us on Zoom or on YouTube, feel free to use the chat. I should be able to monitor both. I can definitely monitor Zoom. Sometimes the YouTube chat's a little strange, and sometimes I can do it and sometimes I can't. So hopefully tonight I'll be able to. So please use chat, and you can ask questions, you can answer questions, you can leave comments. And of course, with Discovering Buddhism, we meet on Monday nights, but there's so much going on at Kadampa Center. So be sure to go to kadampa-center.org. And my favorite place to go is up in the right-hand corner, which is the calendar. And you can see lots and lots of opportunities to do all kinds of things, from meditations to Tara practices to classes with Geshe-la. So if you do have any questions, of course, just put that in the chat for me. Also, once you've accessed the course materials, there is an information page, and please read through that page. And again, let me know if you have any questions at all. So I think I'm going to end my announcements there and go ahead and turn it over to Hemant now.
Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. First of all, welcome everybody. Good evening or good morning or good afternoon. I don't know where everybody's coming from. So I hope you're having a wonderful day. And this is module number 3, Presenting the Path. And on this slide that you see, my name and my email address is there. If you have any questions or you want to connect later on, even after the module is over, at least you have my email address. You can certainly email it to me. We can form a group. We can have some discussions because we would love to have this kind of conversations ongoing, okay? So with that, I know that we are on Zoom, so we are not in the Gampa. So obviously we cannot do prostrations like we would in the Gampa. But for those people who are not familiar with prostrations, somehow there may be a mindset that if you're prostrating to something, to somebody. In this case, it is not such. It is basically a very humble gesture to the teaching of the Buddha, okay? And also a prostration makes you a little humble. It is sort of gives you a moment to think about what is it that you are about to learn. So that's why we do prostrations. So with that said, a little bit about prostrations. As always in Buddhism, there are symbols and they mean something to all of us. So if you were to take a look at the prostration, you are really prostrating to the three gems, which is the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma itself, and to the Sangha or the community. And then, of course, if you were to look at the words, we say Om Namo, Manju Shriye, Su Shriye, Uttama Shriye Soha, not to get too caught up in the words. It is basically, again, showing respect to the glorious one, the good and the peaceful one, and the unsurpassed one. We are talking about Dharma teachings. The left hand symbolifies the wisdom and the right hand, the method. And we'll talk about all of these things. I just wanted to let you know that you do not have to do prostrations, but at least I would suggest that you do a mental prostration, and we go to 4 places. When we join our hands, we go on top of our head, on top in the forehead, to the throat and to the heart, and then back to above the crown. Okay? So we do 3 of those. And you can say the words like Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Shushriye, Namo Uttamashriye Soha. And you don't have to if you don't feel like it. It is simply showing respect. Okay? So we'll just do. Now, the next thing we want to do is bring our mind here to the present. Some of you may have had a busy day or so many activities that might be going on. So what I would like to do is bring our mind here, calm us down, slow down the chatter in our mind. So we'll do a 7-point meditation, it's calm abiding meditation, followed by a nice motivation and intention setting, okay? So just for a little background, you wanna keep your back straight. The reason is our spine is naturally curved. So, but when you sit a little straight up, the energy can flow easily in the body. The idea is about comfort also. Okay, your legs. So a couple of ways. If you're sitting on the floor, then obviously there are a couple of ways you can sit, what they call a full Vajra position or a lotus position, where the right leg is over your left and the left is over your right and the heels are facing upwards. Very difficult position for many of us. Then, which is another one is called the half lotus, but only one leg is sitting on the opposite leg with your heels pointing up. The third position would be none of the heels are facing up. You're just sitting cross-legged. Now, if you're not able to sit on the floor, obviously many of us are sitting on a chair. That's perfectly fine. You just make sure your bottom of your feet are flat on the floor and you're sitting straight. Not tight, just like a stacked coin, okay? Just relaxed. Your arms are relaxed again and loosely placed on your lap, okay? Your hands are resting about 2 or 3 inches below your navel. And your right hand is over your left hand and your thumbs are touching each other, okay? Just like that. Your head is slightly tilted forward, inclined forward. You can gaze on the floor or in front of you. Your jaw and mouth are relaxed, okay? The teeth are slightly apart and the lips lightly touch, okay? Then your tongue rests on the upper palate and the tip of the tongue touches the upper back of your teeth. And the eyes, they suggest to keep it slightly open, but for many it is difficult to do. So you can certainly close your eyes. And the only reason they suggest to keep it slightly open so people don't doze off. But this is a very small calm abiding meditation. I hope nobody dozes off. Okay, so let's bring all of our awareness to ourselves. Just scan your body. Make sure nothing is tight. Everything is, you're relaxed and in a comfortable position. And what we are going to do is you're going to focus on your breath. Breath is neutral. You breathe in and out all day long. So you're just going to focus on the breath. Okay? Just bring your attention to this inhaling and exhaling. Now you can either focus on your nostril, where you feel that tingling sensation, or you can pay attention on your abdomen. When you're inhaling, the abdomen goes out, and then when you exhale, it goes back in, and just focus on that. Occasionally, you'll find that your mind is beginning to drift. It may get caught into some visual, some story, or some chatter in your mind. That's perfectly the nature of mind. So what you want to do is take a look at that. Don't get into the story. Don't drift with the story, and bring your mind back to your breath. And see how long you can keep on your breath. Don't force any breathing. Simply pay attention to your breath. This is a great way to learn to concentrate. One of the most important things we do in this tradition is set our intention or motivation. We take actions after we set the motivation. So let's set the motivation while you are in this calm state of mind. There are so many things, a lot of things going on around you. Your busyness, time, activities. So you ask yourself, what is your intention right now for listening to this course? We know that in tradition, there is nothing better than trying to develop one's mind and to spend some time exploring the topics of presenting the path module. Think, how can you apply what you will be learning to your daily life? And if you find it enriches your life, it helps you open your heart and mind for others, that's when we are touching the Mahayana motivation. The idea, the thought to want to benefit others, to cherish others. So think, may this action here, this sitting together, listening to Buddha's ideas about happiness, about suffering, about how things are, all of these questions we have, may listening to this strongly develop my potential in my mind. May I take some tools from these sessions to develop my own mind and its amazing potential to benefit others, all the way to perfection, to Buddhahood, to enlightenment. And may this action of being here today, being part of this class, and learning about and listening to these teachings be the cause for exactly that result. Thank you. Bring your attention back to the class, please. So in this class, this is the first module, and we typically have an introductory video. And so this video is about good 27 minutes. And so we will not have a lot of time for actual material today, but we will get it going. There's some logistics about reading material, what are the expectations of the classes, and how the topics will be covered. And I will get it going, but it is possible that we may not be able to finish everything today for what the first, the first session would typically cover, but I will catch up on it. I also understand that some of you are on digital media all day long. And so my intention is not to stretch it if I don't have to. If you can get away and you can just pick up on a few things, that would be great. But hopefully we can keep going in a pace that is amicable to everybody, and that we can at least get a lot of this information taken care of, okay? So with that, I will turn this over to Linda, so she will put a video on for introduction.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hemant. If you could stop sharing your screen, I will go ahead and start sharing mine. So this is an introductory video from the FPMT that we begin each new module with. So just bear with me for a moment. I'll get that open. There we go.
Buddhism is a comprehensive system that shows us how to transform our minds from a state of suffering and dissatisfaction to one of extraordinary joy, awareness, and contentment. Vast in scope and profound in its implications, Buddhism accommodates every kind of mental disposition, but retains a laser-like precision that shows us what is to be accepted and what is to be rejected. It was realized and embodied by a human being like us. 2,500 years ago, an Indian prince named Siddhartha from the Shakya clan decided to give up his kingdom to search for a way out of suffering. Because of his relentless determination to find ultimate freedom, he came to understand the nature of his mind and in turn the ultimate reality of all phenomena. He was then called Shakyamuni Buddha. In this show, we will learn about the historical Buddha's life story, the spread of his teachings, and about the stages of the path to enlightenment.
In the following presentations, you're about to hear a great deal about the life, the accomplishments, and the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. Now, the Buddha worked very hard in order to attain enlightenment, and the impetus behind that hard work was his strong motivation to achieve ultimate freedom and to benefit all living beings as much as possible. And so remembering that we've discussed in the past the importance of our own motivation and modeling after the historical Buddha himself, now, before receiving these teachings, set in your own mind a strong motivation to be able to traverse this spiritual path, to reach enlightenment as quickly as possible in order to benefit all living beings.
One format that the life of Buddha is often presented in the Mahayana tradition is the presentation of what are called the 12 deeds. The 12 deeds are said to be the same activities that all of the 1,000 Buddhas who will appear during this fortunate eon in this world system. They'll all engage in these same kinds of activities. They won't have exactly the same lives. They'll be born in different ways, but they'll have certain format of their life similar. And so for that reason, sort of, you might think it's just something that happened in the past, but it's going to happen in the future. So if you know about it, maybe you can be prepared when Maitreya comes and others. In the Mahayana scriptures, it's said that the Buddha himself, the first deed is his leaving of Tushita, handing over the teachership of Tushita, the residency there, to Maitreya, who will be the next Buddha. And the second deed is entering into the womb. The Buddha entered into the womb of his future mother, and at that point she had this dream, very spectacular and pleasant dream of a six-tusked white elephant entering into her. And upon exiting the womb, upon his birth, the Buddha was able to stand up. This young boy was able to stand up immediately and walk 7 steps. The Buddha himself Siddhartha himself showed himself to be incredibly, adroit and expert in many different things. And the next deed is called sporting or enjoying with a harem or retinue of wives. Every kind of pleasure, every kind of sense pleasure, food and warmth, and various castles were built within the walls of the temple, of the city, of the royal city for Gautama. And it's during this point that he is now manifests kind of like what we might notice in the world when people get a little bit bored. He wants to go out of the temple, and his first journey out, he did see some individuals, and on successive journeys, he saw at various times old people, sick people, and a dead person. And and each time he would ask his attendant, what is this? I've never seen this before. What is this old person bent over and so forth, with a cane? What's wrong with him? And his attendant would say, this is an old person. This happened. And Siddhartha would say, well, is that unusual? Are there many of them? And he would say, this happens to everyone. Everyone, this is the fate of everyone. And he saw someone who looked like a renunciate, someone who is seeking the meaning of life, seeking to transcend birth, death, and aging, aging, death, sickness, and so forth, the things that the Buddha had perceived. So this supposedly was the element now that began to coalesce, that clicked in the Siddhartha's mind. This is what I should do. I should leave home also. And he takes the act, he takes his hair, his beautiful royal locks, and with his sword cuts them off. And it's said that that's one of the relics. He goes off seeking teachers, seeking the answer to sickness and old age and death. And even though the teachers themselves were very fond of Siddhartha, recognized him as a prince and saw his great qualities and the fact that he achieved their state, even though they were the teacher, he'd achieved the same realization they did in a very short amount of time. They asked him to stay on and teach their disciples. He refused and went off to try to find an answer to this riddle that he had encountered. Sometimes living on just a small berry from the tree a day. Siddhartha became very emaciated. So at this point, the Buddha himself is beginning to recognize that he's not making any progress. The Buddha went to bathe in the river, found himself very weak, couldn't even get out of the water. Began to worry, what's going to happen. He began then to beg some food. Now the Buddha is invigorated, Siddhartha is invigorated, and he seeks now a place to do meditation, then sits down on this cushion of grass with the determination, until I achieve the essence of enlightenment, I am not rising. So this is now the demarcation of the next act, which is called the defeat of Mara, or the defeat of the Maras. Mara is someone who it can be part of our own being, our own mind, or it can be something external that hinders our spiritual development. And that evening, he achieves his enlightenment, which is now called the next deed, under the Bodhi tree that evening, completely transformed, eliminating from his mind all the vestiges of ignorance and any kind of insufficiency, inabilities, and spends the next 7 weeks without moving very far away. Who shall I teach? Oh, those 5 disciples with whom I spent 6 years. Their minds are only, their Dharma eye is only slightly covered with the dust of ignorance. So he travels, knowing where they are, to the Deer Park near Sarnath, and he begins to teach them on the very first discourse on the Four Noble Truths. And this is the beginning of this deed, which was essentially the next long period of the Buddha's life. So many decades teaching, and for the rest of his life at that time, after that time, spent many decades teaching, turning the wheel of Dharma, finally took the aspect of passing away, dying, passing into parinirvana. So that, in a nutshell, just as a sort of an introduction, is a little bit about the life of the Buddha, the 12 deeds.
This is something you hear again and again, Lam Rem, graduated path. Lam means path, and Rim means graduated or graded, yeah, step by step. And this way of practicing is very specific, to the Tibetan Buddhist presentation of the path. If we think a little bit about the history of Buddhism, because the Lam Rim contains all the Buddha's teachings on sutra. the sutra path. There's two paths, the sutra and the tantra. And the Buddha's path on sutra is divided up, in the Hinayana attitude and the Mahayana attitude. And the Hinayana and Mahayana path, they're all included in the Lam Rim. The main difference between Hinayana and Mahayana is mainly in the attitude, the purpose and the goal. Yeah? That in the Hinayana, one motivates oneself for one's own liberation. In the Mahayana attitude, the attitude is seeking enlightenment, for the sake of all living beings, a more universal goal. And for that, we train ourselves in renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view. Of course, actually to attain enlightenment, one also has to practice Tantra. They say that one cannot attain complete full enlightenment without at some point practice highest Yoga Tantra. But, if you look aside from the attitude, the actual practices of Hinayana and Mahayana go together. They're not sort of two completely separate paths. So the Lam Rim contains all of the teachings. The Hinayana spread to different countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Burma, Vietnam, and flourished there. Later on, when the Mahayana flourished, that spread to China, Tibet, Mongolia, and the northern countries, and flourished there. So anyway, the great Atisha, he came to Tibet, so he wrote the first Lam Rim, the graduated path, taking all of Buddha's teachings, but put it in a very clear, step-by-step, approach. And he called it the three scopes. So in Tibet, this really flourished. So this is what we still practice today. When you see these Lam Rim texts and Lam Rim books, it's all the same way of approaching the spiritual path and the inner development.
So Lama Atisha, what he did was, he presented all of the essential points of Buddha's teachings in this experiential way. And he presented them essentially in three stages. The first, second, and third scopes, they're called. Scope has a very specific meaning. It relates to the capacity of the practitioner, the scope, or the capability, as Lama Zopa says. So the first and second scopes of the practice, of the teachings, they represent all the teachings, all the essential points in Buddha's teachings that we know as the Hinayana part of the path, Hinayana path. Then the third scope is the Mahayana part of the path. The three scopes altogether is all the practices that a person who's on the Mahayana path would practice, because you need to do the first two scopes in order to accomplish the third. Because if you're a Mahayana practitioner, you don't just do the third scope, which is all the compassion. The wisdom wing is the first two scopes, the Hinayana part of the path, and the compassion wing is the Mahayana path. Altogether, a Mahayana practitioner would practice all of these, because you need the first two, you need the wisdom wing in order to accomplish the compassion wing. You need both wings. A bird needs two wings. So it's the way to working on the wisdom wing is where you really work on yourself. You turn yourself into this amazing being, then qualified to actually do the job, of benefiting others. What we really are is a potential Buddha. If it is true that this is our true nature, this is who we really are, then we indeed need someone to show us how to do it. So we look to the need for a teacher. And then there are various ways that are explained in the texts of how to devote oneself appropriately, the very heart of which is the idea of training our minds to see the Lama, the teacher, the spiritual guide, as the Buddha, that the most benefit comes to oneself from this practice. And then our teacher gets, that point of guru devotion is put there by the 14th century Lama of this tradition called Tsongkhapa. And the third point on the preciousness of this life that we have right now, not just to take it for granted. Then this gives us enormous energy to want to not waste it. Then the first point we discussed in the first scope was the need to think about impermanence, but specifically the impermanence of this very person, which energizes us to even more want to not waste this life. That death is definite, its time is uncertain, and that the only thing that can benefit us at the time of death is the virtuous imprints in our mind, nothing else. Then this leads us on to the next contemplation, the first scope, as we discussed, which is looking at the logical likelihood of suffering lives in the future, given that we have a continuity of consciousness that is literally beginningless, given that we've been within samsara, having ignorance and therefore delusions, and therefore being reborn again and again and again, and therefore creating negative karmas endlessly, as well as positive ones. So it's logical, it's just logical, that there are there's a possibility of many suffering rebirths that our mind could take when it leaves this body at the time of death. So our teacher gets us to contemplate the suffering of the lower realms in order to energize us to have a healthy revulsion of being born in this way. This then leads us naturally to the next point, to turn for refuge to Buddha, who's the person who existed 2,500 years ago, who gave us the path, which is the actual refuge, the Dharma itself, the methods, the medicine to cure our minds, the methods to help ourselves transform ourselves, to avoid suffering in the future. And this leads us then to the culmination of the first scope, which is the essence of the practice, which is abiding by the laws of karma. Learning to know what to do and learning to know what to avoid doing, simply to avoid suffering and to get what we do want, which is happiness. It's a very practical solution, because one of the things that we're seeing clearly from understanding karma is that we are responsible for our own suffering and we're responsible for our own happiness, literally. In the second scope, we look more deeply, we look more in a more sophisticated way into our minds and start to see how even this life is in the nature of suffering. But it's much more subtle awareness we need to develop. Really is where we learn to be our own therapists. Understand very deeply in the context, for example, one way of looking at this whole scope is in the context that we discussed last week of the Four Noble Truths. That and the essential point of that is the third one, which is Buddha's assertion that we can be free of suffering. This then really prepares us now to practice the second wing, the third scope, which is the work we do in relation to others. The heart of which is the development of compassion, specifically the development of the very focused, highly developed level of great compassion called bodhicitta. There's love and compassion, for example, these two essential characteristics. Love is the wish that others be happy. Compassion is the wish they don't suffer. It takes two different aspects of a person's life. So, if you love a person, you would see the person and you would be delighting in their good qualities. If you have compassion for a person, you look at the person and you have sorrow at their suffering. You wish they didn't suffer. You have empathy with them, their suffering. Right now, we have the wrong way of cherishing others. We do it because they're our friends and we want them to love us because we can keep being happy. It's completely got strings attached right now, the way we cherish others. And this is why, too, when we have our compassion now, we do have compassion now. We have compassion that's based on attachment. And so it always drags us down. That's why even if we're in the helping professions, we're being very compassionate. We get exhausted and drained, it drags us down. If we have to help people, mentally or physically, we get dragged down by it because we still have attachment to our own needs. So we're talking here of being way beyond attachment, really extraordinary, to go to extraordinary degrees of genuinely cherishing others with no strings, which is almost inconceivable in our culture. Because in our culture, ego is the reference point. It's the realization of the wisdom of emptiness that uproots finally the instincts of ego, which completes the wisdom wing. And then the work of benefiting others is what culminates, completes the active, proactive work of benefiting others, compassion. So it's then that person who finally becomes a Buddha, they've perfected the two wings, completed the two wings, completed the wisdom, completed the compassion,
presenting the path, the Lam Rim, and the way that Lama Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa put it together, it's like the blueprint. It's sort of taking all the Buddha's words and putting it into the order that we need to actually apply it in our lives. And so if I'm feeling like I'm a little bit lost, I don't really know where I need to put my energy and my attention and my practice, it's really easy. The teachings say, and I think this is really true, you can't develop the more advanced realizations if you don't have the very basic ones. I mean, if we haven't coped with our own impermanence and death and suffering, it's impossible to really have a true motivation to get out or even to help others, because we haven't really allowed ourselves to get in touch with how bad it really is, to give us the energy to develop the qualities to make it as good as it's possible to be. And I think the first 12 or 13 years of my practice, I didn't do it that way. I kind of was a lot more hit and miss and really into, trying these more advanced practices and thought they were really cool. But I don't think I fundamentally was becoming a better human being. And it's not until I really went back and thought, I'm not getting anywhere as fast as I wanted to go. So maybe I should do it the way they explain it, that you're really supposed to do it, and spend a year on precious human rebirth and spend a year on death and impermanence until something really moves in my mind. So that's been my experiment the last 3 to 5 years. And at least from my personal experience, my internal experience, I think I'm finally feeling some shifts take place. And the thing that I find really interesting is that as I focus really on the beginning steps, even though I'm focusing most of my attention on the beginning, the other areas actually come more into focus. It's almost like dominoes, a domino effect. Yeah, then it's just a question of not being lazy and stop wasting time and just do the steps. And then maybe become a Buddha, help some people or something. It'd be great. I'd like to do that.
Okay, can you hear me, Linda?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. That was amazing introduction. Every time I see it, I've seen it so many times, but every time I see Rinpoche, His Holiness, the teachings, the Lam Rim, it certainly impacts me quite a bit positively, actually. It's so humbling to see the teachings are available to us. So you heard through the introduction the word Lam Rim, right? And you heard one of the monks mention the word Lam, meaning path or the way, and Rim meaning the graded or a step-by-step stages. So what we're going to do in this entire module, we're going to unpack some of these things. We're going to go through the scopes, and I'm going to walk you through it in a minute, of some of those things that we are going to cover. We will cover the 3 scopes. There are also what we call primers. Before you get going and getting deeper into the basic scope, there are what we call 3 contemplations. We must understand our mind. We must understand the benefit of finding a teacher and also precious human rebirth. So we will cover those subject matters, and we'll then start covering topics under each of these 3 scopes. Okay, and then overarching is the 3 prerequisites. Even for you to get into tantric practices at a later stage, you must understand renunciation, emptiness, and bodhicitta, and you heard a little bit about that. Okay, again, some logistics. This class meets on Mondays from 7 to 8:30. So having this one finishing today, we'll have 6 more left. The next one will be on 19th, followed by 26th, then 3rd, 10th, 17th. Okay, oops, sorry. The ghost has come. Okay, so let's talk about a little logistics of what are the reading requirements. Okay, the materials are already provided to you. If you registered on the Kadampa site, you should be able to access these texts. The first one is The Turning of the Wheel by Lama Thupten Yeshe. It's only four or five pages max. And I would suggest that for the next class, that you would at least read those 5 pages. Okay, so that's your homework. Okay, part of the homework. Obviously, there are 2 others: Method, Wisdom, and 3 Paths, and an outline of Path to Enlightenment by Nick Reibush. Very nice. Further reading requirements are 1 page, Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun. You should be able to get that through materials also. It's nothing more than how to listen to the Dharma. Okay, it's just 1 pager. And it also gets into, page 43 gets into the 3 scopes a little bit. Just a little snapshot. Okay, so that's an easy one. And then the Liberation in Palm of Your Hand. It's my go-to book. And we'll talk about that during the class here and there. There's about 100 pages or 99 to be perfectly clear that it's required reading. It is the first few pages. It talks about how to prepare your mind, how to listen to the teachers, how the student should be, how the teachings are given, the qualities of the teacher, and most amazingly, gives you a little background on Lama Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa, okay, which are our lineage teachers. So I would suggest that at your pace, during this 6 or 7 weeks, I would hope that you would attempt, if you have the book, or if not, I think you can get online, would at least give it a little respect and read some of those pages, all right? And then this is not a 100% requirement because we are not all live, but if you have this book, Wisdom Energy by Lama Yeshe, it looks like this. Let me just show it to you. I don't know if you can see my camera. It looks like this. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. If you want to see what Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, how they got together, how things worked out, how they came in 1974 to the United States and traveled the world, and how the Dharma came to the Western world. And then they also touch things on causes for the unhappiness. They also talk about the 3 principal aspects of the path. It's a fabulous reading. It is a hot book. A lot of people like it. It's always been in a hot list. So just if you get a chance, these are some of the additional materials. If you care to, then I would suggest that you take a look at it. And there's a freebie book from Yeshe Archives. It's called The Essence of Tibetan Buddhism. And it again talks about just general concepts of Buddhist practice. I would suggest Wisdom Energy over that because you would be reading the Liberation in Palm of Your Hands, which covers a lot of that subject matter. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so for the homework, I'm going to tell you up front, I would suggest you read at least the 4 or 5 pages of the required reading, The Turning of the Wheel. Begin to read Liberation in Palm of Your Hand. If it doesn't matter if you read 2 pages or 3 pages, if you can. Okay, that would be very good. And you will see that once you get to the 3rd page, unless you have some urgency, you would want to go further. It's just interesting. It just grabs you. Okay, and I don't know if you guys have Wisdom Energy or not, but if you get a chance, that would be a good book to read at your time. No particular requirement for this course at this point in time, but I would suggest that you take interest if you're serious enough to want to learn this. All right. Any questions on that, guys? Anybody?
No, but Heyman, John Kelly did put in the chat a link to the FPMT online shop for the Wisdom Energy book. So,
great.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Great collection to have. Okay, some logistics, typical class format and expectations. You will see me typically ask for 3 prostrations, at least do mental prostrations. We'll do a calm abiding meditation, always good to calm yourself down from a busy day. I'll go through a summary of a previous class. I find it very helpful, not only to me, but to many classes the classes that I have taught, people have said they really like that because sometimes you are not able to make to a class and it also connects you. The story is connected, right? Then we'll make some comments, interweave within our commentary, any required reading, something from the 3 wheels of the Dharma and so forth. I will interweave those things. And then we'll go to the topics to be covered for that session. We'll wind up doing a closing meditation as appropriate. And then we'll do a dedication. And typically there is some reading that I will ask people to do if you are interested or seriously want to understand the topic. Okay, that's a typical format. Okay, and all I request everybody to do is think about the 3 parts, which is it's an attitude. Okay, it's an attitude that you come to learn. So when you come to this session, you know, we are in our home environment. Again, I said, I don't know what is going on in individual life, but when you come to the class, the point is that you are focused here for this moment in time, the hour and a half that we have, that you pay attention to this. So that they call this analogy of an upside down pot, something that you don't want to do, right? Nothing will go in. You come with you're not paying attention, you're not listening, you're there. That's about it. You're there, but not with it, right? That's called the upside down pot. The next, what they call, is a pot with a hole in it, right? So what happens? You're dreaming about your next vacation, tomorrow's workload, what my boss asked me, what I have to do, I have to pick up this, grocery shopping, whatever it is. So you already have something else going on in your mind. So whatever is being taught goes out of the other ear. It's like a hole in the pot, right? And then the third thing is the pot is full of dirt or poison. You come with a preconceived notion, you don't have an open mind, so you already have a block. Whatever I am doing is correct and whatever you're going to say is not going to go in the first place, but I'm there to listen anyways. So I would suggest to you that just come with an open mind, even as a hypothetically, come with open mind, open heart, and create some room for new experiences, okay? And hopefully you'll benefit from it. So that's enough on that. So those are called the 3 parts. Those who are taking this program seriously and may all go on to certification, there may be a question on what are the 3 parts. So just be aware of that. Okay, so plan for today. Okay. So the purpose of the class is to clarify, simplify, expose you to the path of the teachers that they have provided us in a very nicely step-by-step way, right? And let's do an analogy of the spiritual roadmap. So while you're looking at this, let's go through this. We'll talk about need for a graduated path to enlightenment. We'll talk about the concept of the 3 scopes. We'll talk about the unbroken lineage and brief overview of our lineage teachers, starting from Buddha, Lama Atisha, and Lama Tsongkhapa. You heard a little bit on Buddha's life in the introductory video, but I think it requires a little more deeper dive than they give, even though I'm not going to read his biography here in a session, but at least to get a full understanding of what he actually went through and what he did. So that would be good. This is the 3rd module. And so please remember that those people who have taken modules before, this is just the beginning of the Discovering Buddhism of all 13 modules and the 3rd one. And so if you might have taken the mind and its potential, how to meditate. I have some list here. This is the presenting the paths. The next one will be spiritual teacher, death and rebirth. So what I'm trying to say is the scopes that we will cover will be of an overview, because if you're not going to deep dive very detailed into each of those topics. Why? Because there are modules dedicated to those things. Okay, so just be aware of that. And for those people who are taking it again, it's a great refresher. I find myself when I go to multiple DB classes, I learn something new. Different teachers have different styles, different emphasis, I'm always picking up something different, something new. So it's always very interesting for me. And it also allows me to recognize areas that I need to find to go a little deeper into it, or things that I lack understanding of. And so when I find that, I jot that down and then I do my reading. So again, that's how it goes. So let's see, let me go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about this. This is a very pretty slide for me. I think we need to understand that whenever you make a journey, so think of this presenting the path. We are on a journey. We are going to go somewhere. We are going to get enlightened. That's our goal, isn't it? So if you were to go to a city or make a plan for your vacation, I've used this example before and I find it very important and helpful. Wouldn't you want to make a plan? Wouldn't you want to say, okay, let's go take a trip to New York, okay? You would get a map if you're driving, or if you're flying, you would want to know where you're going, where you're landing. You need to buy a ticket, right? If you're driving, you would want to have gasoline or petrol, depending on where you're from. You want to know how many tolls you have to pay, because if you don't, you'll wind up living in New Jersey because you can't pay the toll at whatever, the Lincoln Tunnel, right? So you need to know where you're going. So this path, this spiritual journey is laid out for us. How wonderful that is. It's like a little map. You guys get step by step by step. That's why it's called Lam Rim. Okay? Isn't it interesting? We also have the same thing. If somebody were to tell you, I want to learn how to make a cake, for example. Okay? What do? You'll get a recipe out, and then you'll find 15 different recipes. And somebody says, tell me, where do I begin? Where do I start? So this module is made or has been given to us through our teachers so that we can understand where to begin and go step by step till your enlightenment. Okay, gives you a good overview of that. So it's a spiritual journey. Oops, this is a very sensitive mouse. Okay, so now think about this. If you were to now travel, okay, you remember we were planning a trip to New York. In this case, we are planning a trip to enlightenment. There are 84,000 teachings. Where do we begin? Okay, which highway are we going to take? 95, 84, 97, whatever it is, right? Where are we going to start? So this is a great way to understand why this step-by-step progressive pathway of enlightenment is. And it is self-paced. It is developed for individual growth at your pace. Nobody's pushing this down. Nobody is trying to pressure anybody. This is not about becoming Buddhist right away or anything like that. This is purely his experience, Buddha's experience, and his teachings put into a very beautiful, graduated and a graded way. And for you to reflect, learn, challenge it, polish it, learn it. Just like if you were to buy a jewel, you would want to polish it, make sure it's pure gold. You want to check it out and keep open mind. That's how you would understand this 84,000 teachings. Okay. Before we also go further, before we go here, I do want to acknowledge the teachers. If you were to learn Lam Rim properly, you will see in the palm of your hand, the very first chapter is to talk about the qualities of the teachers, how the teaching should be done, how teachers are teaching it, how the students should receive the teachings. So there is an acknowledgement of the teachers who have worked very hard to put this together for us. And at least for our session today and coming from Kadampa Center, I do want to acknowledge the teachers and the venerables that have provided and taught us this material. And I want to start by thanking Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Obviously, he leads the FPMT and has all the FPMT Center. So, and he's my teacher also. So I want to bow down to him. And then, of course, all the way to Geshe Gelek and to Geshe Sangpo, our Geshe-las at Kadampa Center, who teach us this in and out, day in and day out. Geshe Gelek every Wednesday, every Sunday, he keeps touching these topics. So I wouldn't have learned many of these things without his teachings. Obviously, our Venerable Lamola, Venerable Kandola, Venerable Chokila, so supportive, and they support Geshe-la in so many ways, including all the students. Obviously, the Discovering Buddhism teachers, we want to acknowledge them because, you know, at one point I also took DB1, and I can't remember, it was a long time ago, and what progress it has, you know, how I have progressed. So I want to thank them for that. Also, I want to thank Linda. Thank you so much for supporting us. Right now, we are able to do this class because of people like Linda Shah. So thank you, Linda. Of course, our spiritual program coordinator at Kadampa Center and all the volunteers. So thank you, and I want to thank you guys for actually coming to the class. So with that, we can now really talk about moving on. Okay. So these are the 3 scopes of Lamrim. Before we learn Lamrim, we will definitely get into the preliminaries. I call them the primers. You know, before you paint the house, you got to do that first coat, and then you put the paint on it. Similarly, we will learn a little bit about what is mind. Now, I'm not going to get into every factor and all the 6 primary minds and all that, but at least understand the nature of mind, right? Then the importance of having a teacher. I mean, think about Lamrim, it came from teachers. Right? Today we have Google and internet, and I know that people can search, but remember, unbroken lineage. There are so many commentaries and ideologies out there. However, you want to not break that teachings all the way from Buddha to us. So we have the 3 scopes of Lamrim. The lower scope, like you heard Venerable Robina talk about it, the lower scope is for the persons of beginning capacity, I should say. They sometimes call that a modest scope, not necessarily lower, just modest. You need to understand precious human rebirth. So we will get into that a little bit. We will also learn about death and impermanence. We'll learn about different realms in suffering, and then why we take refuge. And then obviously we want to understand the laws of karma. This prepares you. It may even make you really think deeply how important it is to understand how you can get out of this cyclic existence and free yourself or liberate yourself. Other words they use for liberation is nirvana. In India, they use word moksha. Right? So these are the things you need to know. Then we go a little deeper dive. The first teaching that Buddha had was the 4 Noble Truths, right? The 4 Noble Truths. And we'll talk about those, what they mean. And then we'll understand a little bit more about causes of suffering. What causes this suffering? And we'll talk about 12 links. And those are those are links that will tell you step by step what keeps us bringing back in samsara. Right, back again. You die, take rebirth, go through the same problems, and then you go back, you die again, and you're born again. How do you liberate yourself? How do you free yourself from that? So we talk about the 12 links. And then, of course, the greater scope comes in. And you heard from Venerable Robina again about, we learn more about equanimity, we learn about compassion, bodhicitta, and the 6 perfections. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about it right now. Maybe for some of you, these words don't mean too much. For many, even some of you may not even know what bodhicitta means. So we will unravel some of those meanings. I have definitions, every class I have some definitions. So starting from next class, obviously. And we'll cover a little bit about emptiness. Now, emptiness, I put it in the greater scope because how we are covering it. But if you heard it, the first 2 scope does talk about wisdom. It weaves through all of these 3 things. There are 3 things that you'll know that not specifically, or at least 2 of the 3 not mentioned specifically. One is renunciation. So when we talk about the 12 links and what brings you always in a samsara or cycle of life and death, then you'll realize that you need to have an urge to get away from some of these things that cause, those are the obstacles to life. So you're going to go into the 12, you're going to understand renunciation. And at some point, you need to have the wisdom to understand how things really exist. Okay, so we will talk about emptiness. So this is what we will be covering throughout our next 6 classes after this class. So be mindful that always with a lot of these practices, you also establish your own practices. In the morning, you do some practice. And for those who don't do it, we can certainly, there's a class on that, you know. So certainly that is one of the module, how to develop your practice, you know, your daily practice. And so there are some preliminaries, always good to get your mind in order and get situated before you can deep dive into some of this subject matter. So if you're doing those preparatory practices and preliminary practices, fantastic. But for those that are not doing it, no worries at all. As you develop, you will develop some preliminary practices. Any questions so far? Any questions? No?
Sue, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sue.
And this is a very basic question that I've been wondering about for quite a while. What are the titles mean? Venerable and Geshe and Lama. What do those titles indicate?
Right. So these are simply titles because of their position or what they have studied. For example, a Geshe is a person that has actually studied for 25, 26 years. And they're like PhDs. If I want to make an analogy, they're like PhDs in Buddhism or in Dharma. So they would be called a Geshe. They have to go through tests and debates and very stringent requirements and practices to be able to, in order to be called Geshe. When a female monk is ordained, we give them respectful name called venerable. Okay, so sometimes unless they are Geshe or they have gone through some practices, then they have the degree called Geshe, so we call them Geshe La or something like that. Otherwise, a lot of times, out of respect, we call venerable so-and-so. It's simply as that. Then you see Rinpoches. Rinpoches are sometimes called incarnates or reincarnated. They have made connections and they are extremely learned, way more than one would know. Okay, so they are called Rinpoches. And this, we will cover it. Maybe we'll have a Q&A session and go through some of these, and I'll bring some information so that we can actually read and go through it one by one. That would be helpful. Is that helpful to you?
It is, thank you.
Okay, all right. I know sometimes I'm looking on the side, and that's because I'm looking at everybody's faces, which is on the right-hand side. So pardon me if I'm acting like I'm not looking at anybody. So let's recognize the unbroken lineage. There were many teachers, of course, in the lineage, but let's just at least focus on 3 of them right now, and then we'll mention others. Shakyamuni Buddha, of course, we all know that this is all the teachings come from Buddha's teaching. And before he was a Buddha, he was called Siddhartha, Gautama Siddhartha. That was his name, just so you know, and we'll talk about that a little bit, time permitting. Again, it was the 5th century. We will talk about the 3 turning of the wheel shortly, if time permitting, if not next class. His 4 Noble Truths at Deer Park was his first turning of the wheel. Turning of the wheel is synonymous with teaching, okay? Because he put things in motion. So they call him the turning of the wheel. So don't get confused with those words. All that means is his major teachings. Obviously, he continued to teach for 45 years after enlightenment. So there are many teachings, but if you were to remember the main first 3 things that he did after enlightenment, and so that those were the 3 turning of the wheels. We'll talk about that. The second turning of the wheel was perfection of wisdom at Vulture's Peak. We'll also take a little deeper dive in that. And then the third one was reconciliation. He realized that some of these things may be way over people's head, or depending on the capacity of people, there may be confusion between the understanding of some of these teachings. So he reconciled and he went further into teaching people according to their capabilities, okay? And then we jump to 11th century, Lama Atisha. He was born in West Bengal, India. And he was invited by one of the king of Tibet. Okay, so he went there and he saw that while Buddhism was already existing, there were marvelous yogis and teachers out there, but in general, people had lost their plot. And so he went there, he stayed there for between 15 and 17 years, and he took all of these 84,000 teachings and he put them into a very nice step-by-step graded way That's the beginning. He wrote a book called Lamp for the Path. We'll cover that again, probably. I may be duplicative here. But he took the 84,000 teachings and he put them in a very nice Lamrim. So that was the beginning of Lamrim. And then we jump to 14th century, Lama Tsongkhapa. He is the main teacher of our lineage of the Gelugpa tradition. Okay, and so very learned. We will also cover some of his story. Very brilliant from childhood. People had predicted that he is going to be somebody great. There were many, many signs. And he extensively wrote commentary on the Lamrim, which is, I will show you the book. You might have seen it. Give me 1 second, and I think it's important that you see it. This is the treatise, right? The great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. There are 3 volumes. Now, you will find out that he wrote 3 types: a small version, a medium version, and this long version. This is called the Great Treatise. Okay, fantastic commentary on Lamrim. And there are some qualities about this book that we will cover. Right now, I'm just covering that we need to at least know who these teachers were. Okay. And also there were many Indian masters. There was in 1st century, there was Nagarjuna, who again was very adept, very highly qualified person. And he brought and he clarified the teachings on emptiness, the wisdom. And then in 7th century, you had teachers like Chandrakirti, who was a student of Nagarjuna, who expanded it. So there were many, many teachers, and we will learn about them a little bit. But right now, I just wanted you to at least take a look at the 3 teachers that we are talking about Lamrim in this particular path. So it will be important to know. And the lineage is not broken. If you look at our teachers right now, look how they are connected from His Holiness, from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Geshe-la's teacher, Kenshu Rinpoche, and our Geshe-la, and Geshe Sangpo. So when they're teaching, at least when they're teaching classes on Sundays or Wednesdays, just know that these are very learned, very practiced people, great, great monks, and we are very fortunate to have this teaching come to us through such highly, I would call them yogis in my mind, my teachers, okay? You saw this, Richard Gere spoke about this, but I like this slide a lot. And why I like it? Because it is like a mission statement. Those of you who work may be familiar with words like mission statement, but this tells me a lot about this path. It tells me, if you read this, Buddhism is a comprehensive system. Itself is a beautiful word, comprehensive, encompassing, okay? That shows us how to transform our minds. Not somebody else's mind, our mind. From a state of suffering. The word suffering is sometimes misunderstood in Western world. We think of suffering as pain. But in Sanskrit, the word is dukkha. Dukkha means dissatisfaction. When you think about birth, life, old age, sickness, losing money, gaining job, losing loved one, you go through ups and downs. That doesn't mean you don't have moments of happiness. But generally speaking, old age and death and all that, if you put that, that's how they use the word suffering. And then what he says, from a state of suffering to satisfaction, to one of extraordinary joy. That's where we should focus. If that's what you want to gain, joy and awareness and contentment. It is vast in scope and profound in its implications. If you put this to practice, then you will see the results, right? Simple. So now Buddhism accommodates every kind of mental disposition, but retains a laser-like precision that shows us what is to be accepted and what is to be rejected. And it was realized and embodied by a human being like us. That's most amazing to me. A person like us who went through this, experienced it, is teaching us, and he's saying it it can be your experience also. So that's where it begins. Okay. And then again, this is just to emphasize that very fact that 2,500 years ago, Siddhartha from the Shakya clan decided to give up his kingdom to search for a way out of suffering, dukkha, dissatisfaction. And because of his relentless determination, and that's what we should all have, right? Relentless determination to find the ultimate freedom, he came to understand the nature of mind and in turn, the ultimate reality of phenomena. He was only then called Shakyamuni Buddha, right? He was called Siddhartha, Gautam Buddha, and all these words, but he was known as Buddha after he was awakened. Okay, I know that I have a biography of Shakyamuni Buddha. I think it's 8:15. And like I told you, I will respect your time. I know this class goes till 8:30. So maybe we start the next class with a biography of Buddha, talk a little bit about Lama Tsongkhapa, and then we'll talk about, Atisha Lama Tsongkhapa. So that will be that. And then we'll cover the 3 contemplations, the nature of the mind. We'll go through why one needs a teacher. And we'll go and talk a little bit about precious human rebirth. And we will have a full class next time, most likely. So all I would ask you is to start reading the 3 turnings of the wheel. And I'll also cover those. When we are going through Shakyamuni Buddha, we will talk about the 3 turning of the wheels. Okay, so we'll cover that. And we'll cover Lama Atisha, we'll cover Lama Tsongkhapa. There's some definitions. So let me, at least we have 5 more or 6 more minutes. Let's cover some definitions. So when we talk about liberation, or when we talk about the word nirvana, what does it mean? So what it's saying is, it's a state of complete freedom from samsara. This life and death cycle of all sentient beings, right? Of anybody that is born, goes through the changes in the life, gets old, maybe even sick, and then dies. So to liberate from that, you can also look at it to escape from suffering, to move away from this chatter in the mind and remove all the obscurations, all the defilements, and be liberated. And so that's called nirvana. So then what is enlightenment? It's called fully awakening Buddhahood. Omniscience. We'll talk about those words at another time. But right now, understand, it is the ultimate goal of Mahayana Buddhist, attained when all obscurations have been removed and all qualities of the mind have been fully actualized. But now we add one more thing. Till then, it sounds very much like nirvana, but a state characterized by perfect compassion, wisdom, and power. That's what makes it Mahayana, and that's what makes it enlightenment. People, bodhisattvas who want to get enlightened will sometimes forego nirvana and want to help others. So just so you can understand, the yearning to become a Mahayana practitioner is very strong, okay? And we all want to be enlightened. Okay, so preview again, the 3 preliminaries, the contemplations, we need to understand that. Okay, and then let's see if I have anything else that I wanted to make sure say something here. Okay, I think that's it. And then we'll start to get into the small scope, the first square out of the 3. We will talk about death and impermanence. That itself is a pretty hefty subject matter. We'll talk about suffering of the realms, and then we'll talk about why one should take a refuge and what refuge means. Okay. Any questions, what we plan to do and how this class will go? Okay. So we'll do a dedication now, okay? So let's just, again, get to that position of the meditation, calm abiding meditation, and just go within your mind. And so let's dedicate. Now, as we come to the end of our class, let's take a moment to dedicate the merit of having made this effort to listen to the teachings to the swift enlightenment of each and every living being. dedicate this merit that we ourselves might quickly attain the awakened state of the perfectly awakened Buddha and be able to benefit all living beings by leading them to that same state. May we generate the bodhicitta, a wish for others to be happy, which has not been generated. Let's generate. May the bodhicitta which has been generated not decline, but always increase. And may the gap of our mind and the Dharma be reduced to nothing. May our minds become perfect Dharma to benefit all. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm fully available. I'll hang around. I have some other definitions we'll go through next class. Any questions? Any thoughts? Interesting? Crazy stuff.
Thank you, Heyman. That was great.
Yeah, I think this is a great, nice overview of the topic of path for those that are beginning to read different books and different things and wanting to find out what is it about and how do I get there and how can I become that way and all that. This is a nice step-by-step way to get to understand what it is like. And then you can, it's like they say, it's never too late. You start, right?
Just a reminder that the homework will be posted online at some point after tonight. But it was just to start read the turning, forget the name of it, turning of the wheel. And then begin the liberation in the palm of your hands reading.
And how do you find that?
So you need to sign in. So I did put that information in the chat, Gary. So
the regular sign-in user thing, and okay, never mind.
Yeah, and then you just go to and then there's the page with all the information and all the readings. Yeah. If you have any questions or have a hard time finding any of that, don't hesitate to email me. Are the slides? So Heyman, we're getting asked if your slides are on the site.
Not yet. Once I go through the class and finish the class, I want to make sure there is that I've given credit to the right people, and then I will be able to share that. And I've talked with Geshe-la about it, not a problem to share.
Okay.
I will share it.
And Linda, those extra books that were mentioned, I couldn't gather it all fast enough.
Yeah, I will tell you right now. One is, I don't know if you can see my camera or not, but it is called The Wisdom Energy, Basic Buddhist Teachings by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Heyman, but it is, once you sign in, Gary, and you go to the Discovering Buddhism Materials page.
Yeah, I did see that one, but he mentioned some other books in that slide, and that's what I was referring to, that I didn't recognize from your page. Well, we'll take it as it goes.
Well, the Liberation in Palm of Your Hand is also in there. It's also in there. The Essence of Tibetan Buddhism is a very small Lama Yeshe book. It's also in there. You'll just see it. And to me, what I was emphasizing was obviously the entire Lamrim is in the Liberation in Palm of Your Hand, which is very important. But if you care to read further and understand how Lama Zopa Rinpoche brought Dharma to the Western world and what they went through, and the teachings of the three aspects of the path, this is a wonderful book to have, Wisdom Energy.
Is there an existing group chat on any platform, or would anybody else be interested in creating a group chat to be able to communicate with other people over the course of the week between classes?
Linda, I would leave that to you. Maybe we can create a chat, or somebody can start and be the leader. And if you can provide the names of the participants, then we can have a little group that can chat.
So we have tried that in the past, and it does take someone willing to, and who has the time and the energy to set that up and get that going. It's not something that I can do. But having said that, if you, John's hugging for one tonight. It's so cute. So having said that, if you go to the FPMT website and you take the course, you can of course keep going through the Kadampa Center course, like tonight's class. But this would be a really nice complement to the FPMT course. And the FPMT course does have a group. I don't know if it's a chat, but it's, yeah, John's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. Go ahead, John.
Kind of like a blog or a chat.
It's like a support group, and the teacher is also there to answer questions and things like that as well. So that would be an alternative means to get involved in a support group.
Or a Facebook group, maybe.
Say that again, I didn't.
Willis suggested a Facebook group.
Sure. I mean, if you plan to go through the module and you're going to go through all of these modules, it's a wonderful thing to be connected in some way. And you can certainly do that. If somebody can take leadership and create a group and invite some of these people, then there will be some blog. Yeah, I've seen that this peaks up and then starts to slowly go down now and then, but you never know. And if it helps anybody, then certainly it's a wonderful thing to have. So if somebody wants to take leadership, that would be great. And I'm available. I send you my email. If you want, next time I'll even give you my telephone number. As far as I know, you're calling so that it doesn't go into spam bucket. I'll be more than happy to. I get people still reaching out to me through text and messengers and stuff like that, and I'm able to find answers or connect with them sometimes, and I've maintained friendship for over years now. So no problem. Okay. So hope this class was helpful to at least start. At least you know what we are going to cover. I know how we're going to, at least you're going to get an overview of the 3 scopes and start to begin to understand the journey. Right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very,
Bye.
very good.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Heyman.
Thank you, Linda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.